Hello. So here we are. We're going to discuss King of the Hill, the entire season. I'm not going to give a breakdown of every single episode. I'm basically just going to give you the themes and whether I like the episodes or not, what my favorite episode was, and what I think things are going to happen in the future. So we're going to break that down. We're going to talk about Fantastic Four First Steps, the movie. We're going to do a review of that as well. And that's pretty much it. I think that ought to be enough content for this entire video because I think most of us are, entertained by this stuff. But we're gonna start with King of the Hill because to me, King of the Hill is tremendous. It was one of those series that I really really enjoyed throughout my childhood. Well, technically, I think the show started in like 96, 97, or something like that. So I was a teenager when the show started. I really didn't understand it until I was an adult, obviously. But it's a show I watch in reruns. It's a show I watch like various episodes. I love watching clips of it. It's phenomenal. And it was one of the shows where it seemed like nobody else watched it when I was watching it. Now I'm so glad to find a thriving King of the Hill fandom. I'm just very excited about it. It's really good. Now we're going to talk about the new season. Obviously, there's issues with the new season. Obviously, there's issues with the animation. Obviously, there's issues, quite a few, with the voices, the characterizations, and we're going to talk about that stuff. And in fact, let's start with that. Let's start with the sort of the cons of the new season and some of the questions people have asked. The number one question people are concerned about is whether the show is woke or not. The answer to that question is no. It is not fully woke. It doesn't make fun of wokeness, but it's not a fully woke show. Behind the scenes, it might be a little bit woke, however. They changed the voice of Khan Supernufan's phone. They changed his voice. Now he's being played by an actual Asian man, and it's not great. Um, this, of course, happened because of that complaining jabroni, whose name I don't remember, that he was mad about Apu from The Simpsons. So that has led to this revolution in animation where the voice actor has to match the character, even if it doesn't make sense, even if the voice doesn't sound good. And Khan's voice is not great. His voice is worse than Dale. As much as people complain about Dale's voice, you can kind of say, okay, Dale's voice is probably damaged from years of chain smoking, but there's no reason for Khan to sound the way that he sounds. And the only reason that he will sound that way is if you change the voice actor, which they did. Now he's being played by an actual Asian man, but it's not a Laotian Asian man. Funny how that works. you know, just pick a random Asian to play Khan's voice. See, Samurai Jack was written during a time where the character's race didn't have to match his voice. You know, that's now it does. This is the world that we live in now. This is the woke shit, right? Now, King of the Hill, that's the most woke thing about the show, I think, is that they changed some of the voice actors, namely Khan's voice. Now, so number one, the show is not woke. Two, the animation is not great. It's a little stiff. Obviously, they tried to cheap out on it. They probably weren't sure whether it was going to be successful or not, so they were kind of cheap with the animation. It does look, the character designs look good. I like that each character looks like themselves, slightly older. Probably the character that probably got the most, I would say, brutalized by age is Boomhauer. He looks significantly older. Um, Boomhauer looks really, really old. Um, so it's that's deeply problematic. But most of the other guys don't look that old. Bill doesn't look like he's changed at all. There's just only a little bit of age on Hank and Peggy. Nancy looks significantly older. So But that's about it. It's basically just Boomhauer and Nancy. They look old. Um, GH is in the season. GH is too old. All right. That was a big problem when I got to that episode because I had saw clips of this new character and I was like, what is that? And then when I got to the episode, I was like, that's Hank's little brother. He should have been about 9. There's only been like an 8 year difference between the last season and this one. It's a continuation. It's not a reboot. It's a continuation of that series. So even though 15 years have passed, in universe only 8 years have passed, which means GH should be like a second grader. They got him as like a teenager in this series. He's like, 13, 14 or something like that. That's way too old. GH is not that old. So that's a continuity error. So that's a problem. Now, some of the characters are what they call flanderized, meaning they're basically caricatures of themselves. Some of the subtlety from the original series is gone. Some of the characters are a little bit more aggressively in character. Peggy is one of them. She feels right, but she's more aggressively in character. Dale obviously is the most affected. Now, Dale is the most affected, namely because of the way politics works today versus 25 years ago. In 2000, Dale Gribble was obviously he's a conspiracy theorist. He's into aliens and government conspiracies, all this kind of stuff. He was on the fringes of society at that time. Alex Jones and all that kind of stuff. But today, that stuff is pervasive with the internet. So in order for Dale to be the conspiracy theorist on the show, he has to be crazier than the average person. So they did a job where they basically pushed Dale so far out that he's almost completely detached from reality. All right. So it's a question. I saw some people say that Dale has crossed the line from being sort of the friendly loon to being sort of like actively dangerous. They didn't know Dale. Dale was already dangerous. He's paranoid, and you have severe paranoia, you are dangerous. So, and Dale is severely paranoid, so he is already dangerous. They made him a little bit more competent in this series, which make it darker. So that's one of the things that is about the show that changed, is that the show is slightly darker than it used to be. They curse on the show now where they didn't really curse before, but that's probably a change between television and direct to consumer. It's on Hulu now, so they can do a little bit more in terms of cursing and sex. And so there's more sex in the show. There's more cursing in the show. There'll probably be more violence in the show. So Dale being more aggressive kind of fits into that darker tone that takes part in the show due to the fact that it's on direct to consumer. It's not on TV. So him just being a little bit darker, Peggy cursing, some of the other characters cursing and all that kind of stuff. All right, they're taking a little bit more mature route because all the characters are now adults with the exception of GH. There are no children characters on the show. Well, technically Boomhauer has a stepson, I guess you could say, and he's on the show. So he's the only child on the show. There are no children on the show anymore. So that makes sense. Obviously, again, this is spoilers. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you go watch it first. But before we get into the themes, I must mention I was very disappointed that Luann was not in the show at all. She wasn't even mentioned in the show. That was very disappointing. Obviously, you have to save some stuff for season 2, and there's going to be a season 2 of, or season 15, I guess you could say. And likely you'll see Luann there with her baby and Lucky and all of them. But Tom Petty passed away, who was the voice of Lucky. And maybe that's why, there's so many voice actors that died. John Redcorn died, Dale died, Luann, her voice actor died. Tom Petty, Lucky's voice actor died. So they gotta work around, some characters that where the voice actor passed away. All right. So you have to recast Luann, you have to recast Lucky, and they had to do a rush job with Dale. So Dale's voice is very bizarre throughout the series. You can tell when they formally made the change because his voice is very different, but it's fully understandable why his voice is different. John Redcorn, he's not in the show a lot, so you don't really miss the idea of John Redcorn because he's not in the show a whole lot. He's very much in the background. Um, Buck Strickland is still there. I expected Buck Strickland to be dead. I don't know why, but I expected Buck Strickland to be dead, but he's still alive. So he was only in one episode, but it was very cool that Buck Strickland was still alive. But obviously, the big missing piece of King of the Hill was Luann. She's a main character. No, she's not like she's part of the Hill family, right? So she lives in the house, and there were so many plots that surrounded Luann. For her not to be featured in the show was a huge miss. I will say this, however, they did complete Luann's character arc. You know, her character arc in the show has always been about escaping this sort of abusive, the cycle of violence. You know, she was born in a trailer park where her family was very violent. Her mother attacked her father with a fork. Her father is a drunk and an alcoholic and a drug abuser and all this sort of stuff, and he's manipulating her and all this, and it's very dark. And you know, she faces all these tragedies, but she keeps getting back up and she keeps trying. Near the end of the series, we see Luann find what she was actually looking for, which is a family, right? And she has that now. So her character arc is technically over. So you really don't have anything else to do with Luann, but it would be nice if Luann was still in the show because she is still a young mother. So there's something that you could bring in. And plus, she adds elements to Peggy. She adds elements to Hank. She was basically like a daughter figure to Hank while he was trying to maintain that uncle, you live here, but not really kind of thing. But so that was a big missing piece for me. And she was also a big part in the development of the child characters, like Bobby and Joseph and Connie. You know, she was just a little bit older than they were. She basically was like not like a role model, but basically what they could expect they saw through Luann. So, you know, that character missing was major. Um, Chain Wasana Song is a more important character in the series now. He wasn't that important before, but he's far more important now. What they decided to do with him in terms of the importance of that character made sense. It makes sense. He's very, very important in the Connie and Bobby relationship. He always has been, but now he's even more important in that angle. We'll talk about that in a minute. But almost none of the other Tom Landry characters show up. So, you know, that's very unfortunate, but maybe in the future you'll see more. I think as the series continues to go, you'll probably see them introduce more and more characters, I think. Um, Especially since there are certain characters they can't use anymore. Like Cotton was very important to the series. And Cotton obviously died in the last. So they did a good job when they connected Cotton and GH. We'll talk about that later too. But there is no Cotton in this. Obviously, he's probably going to appear in flashbacks, but for the most part, there's no Cotton. They did import tons of black characters, though. There are now almost 200% more black characters than there were in King of the Hill before. There's a lot more black people in the series now than there was before. So, mess up King of the Hill episode Halloween Pigman. Oh, the Pygmalion episode, where Luann, when she got seduced by this multimillionaire who was dressed up like a pig or something like that. That was pretty crazy. You said you believe that John Redcorn's actor was alive to do his voice acting for the season. Yeah, because he wasn't in there a lot. Well, Dale died halfway through the recording. Yeah, there's 10 episodes in the series, and I believe the original voice actor is in 6 of them. So obviously they might have had to redo some of the dialogue, which probably led to some of the wonkiness in the early part of the season with Dale's voice. But for the most part, I think Dale was. You said were black people even to have more black characters? Yes, there was Buddha Stack. He was one of the major black characters on the show. But now they have a black neighbor. That Bill has like tons of black friends. They don't have names yet, but he has like all these black friends now, or black male friends. They have mothers and wives and such. It becomes an important character element later. But there was black characters on the show originally, but there was only like 1 or 2. It wasn't a lot. But now there's more, substantially more. So those are the significant changes. The writing for the season, I think the show was pretty funny. Oh, you said were black people asking to have more black people on the show? Well, they're always looking to have more black people on the show. Almost always. I don't remember anybody ever complaining about the lack of black characters on King of the Hill. But then again, like I didn't know there was a thriving King of the Hill fandom like this. So maybe there were. But I know Chris Rock was the voice of Buddha Sack, who was, a comedian who went to work for Strickland Propane back in I forget, I don't know what season he debuted in, man. I don't get me the line. But he was on the show. And he was like the only major black character on the show. So we're definitely gonna talk about that. Darren Miles says he's been thinking Family Guy doesn't know how to write likable people like King of the Hill or Futurama. And that's why I don't like Family Guy. All the characters from Family Guy are pretty much stupid, and they're kind of the same as far as I'm concerned. But Futurama, when you do a good job with characterization, you can build a plot around a specific character, and really only that character can fit that plot. And so when you see Futurama, and Futurama is absolutely fantastic. I love Futurama. I did not watch when they continued Futurama because I think it ended on such a strong note that I really didn't want to see it go on. I don't think King of the Hill did end on a strong note, and I wanted to see it go on. So, but Futurama is tremendous. Futurama is one of my favorite shows. Maybe we'll talk about that one day. Maybe I'll just get in the mood and watch all of Futurama all over again. I love that show. But King of the Hill has always been a very strong series because they don't really have sci-fi elements. It's very grounded, very slice of life. So each character, they have to be strongly in character, and then you can do things with that character. Boomhauer was very underutilized in the previous run of the show. There was not a whole lot of Boomhauer. There was that when you did have Boomhauer episodes, however, it was mostly about Boomhauer and his relationships. Him being a playboy, then him having a broken heart, him being jealous of his brother because his brother's going to get married, and that kind of thing. And now in this series, you see Boomhauer has taken up being a stepfather to this little boy, but you never see Boomhauer's girlfriend. You never see her ever. So she doesn't even appear in the series, which is very odd. But you got to save some things for season 2. And Boomhauer, you actually see him doing work in these various episodes now. Where Boomhauer is too cool to do anything in the previous season, but now he's a bartender, he's a carpenter, he's doing all these different things. Because apparently everybody's retired except Dale. Dale's the only one who's not retired. Everybody else is pretty much retired. So they're all older, looking for different things to do, pretty much. So that's Hank's story throughout the entirety of the season is Hank is now retired, but he doesn't want to sit around and do nothing. So each episode is basically him trying to find something to fill his time. He's picking up new hobbies and all this sorts of stuff. And obviously they're empty nesters. And Peggy's trying to find different things to do, et cetera, et cetera. And how are they going to fill their time? And how are they going to deal with the rapidly changing world that they have here? WG Field says, how many seasons do you think this revival can last? I think they probably got 3 in them. I'm gonna go with 3. This season was a pretty good setup for the next season, because this season was all about getting people to reinvest in the characters, reminding them of the storylines, creating new plots, reestablishing the characters, taking the characters in new directions, fresh directions. But they've done all the setup now, you know, especially that last episode. It wasn't a strong episode overall, but it told a really strong point for 2 very specific characters. When we get there, we'll talk about that. And that angle is probably what's going to what hinges on the success of the series, I think, is what happens with Bobby and Connie. I think at that point, people will decide whether they're going to drop off or keep going, depending on what happens with Bobby and Connie. That's going to be very important. And from everything that I've seen, that's what people are very, very concerned about. A lot of the people calling the show woke is all because of Connie and all the clips taken out of context of Connie. That's been a big, big problem and a hindrance to the show. All of the people putting out all this E&M stuff, this ethical non-monogamy shit, that's been the stuff that's been hindering the progress of the show. More people would have been excited about the show if they had not added that into it. But they added it into it for a specific purpose that if you watch the entire show, you would understand. Okay? So we're going to talk about that when we talk about Bobby and Connie a little bit later. But I think it probably got about 3 seasons in them. But it also depends on how they choose to develop Boomhauer's girlfriend, whether they reintroduce Luann, if they find Hank another job or something like that for him to do. All of that's going to be pretty important in the future for the show. GH is going to be a very important character in the future too. So, and I'm thinking he's probably going to be more important than we think, especially once we get to the Hank and GH episode. I'm thinking eventually GH is going to be living with Hank. That's one of my big brained. I just truly believe that's going to occur. Hank and Peggy do not have any more children. Clearly, Dee Dee cannot raise good Hank by herself. She's going to leave good Hank with Hank. And I truly believe that's going to happen. I thought it was going to happen when Cotton died, but I think that's the angle we're going to go with, is she's just going to leave GH with Hank and probably just leave him and run off with some guy or something. So I could see the show getting more from that, because they're not going to give Hank and Peggy another baby. So they're probably going to give them good Hank in order for them to raise him. And I think they pretty much tapped that vein a little bit in this season. They kind of set it up. So we'll see if they actually decide to do that or if I'm just completely off base. But again, this season was just basically filling Hank's time up with different things and playing with him and his character a little bit, and showing Bobby. And it did a lot of work on Bobby. Obviously, King of the Hill throughout the entire series is a family-oriented show. It's based very, very much on the relationship between Hank and Bobby. And that's a really strong episode and really strong theme in episode 2 with fathers and sons. That was a really good episode. That's probably my favorite episode of the entire season. It was the beer episode. Now, I'm not going to give away the plots of too many of the episodes. I'll give away the theme. I don't want to give away too many of the plots. I may talk about the subplots, but I don't want to spoil it too much for everybody. But they did a good job of aging up Bobby. Bobby is still, he's still a weird boy. You know, he's not as weird as he was as a kid, but he's still kind of a weird kid, weird young adult. He stands up to Hank a little bit more now. He kind of plants his feet on some issues. And the beer episode is one he really, really says, hey, I know my stuff when it comes to this beer thing. I ain't been drinking beer as long as you, but I know what an audience likes. You know, now he runs a restaurant and he become a sort of beer connoisseur because he knows what the paying customers want. while Hank is a consumer and says, well, this is what I've always drank. This is what I want. So the episode is centered around Hank trying to figure out home brewing, making his own beer. And Bobby wants to help him make the beer, but they disagree about what kind of beer to make. And then it becomes a competition. So that's the fun thing where they both agree that, beer is a good thing and they will rather work on it together, but their views of beer is so different. While Bobby's is more modern, Hank's is more traditional, and that's the conflict. And that's always been the conflict between Hank and Bobby, and they kept that alive. That comes up again when it comes to Bobby's restaurant, where he uses charcoal rather than propane, and Hank was offended and Bobby wouldn't use propane in his restaurant. It's fantastic. That was really good stuff because you could tell it hurt Hank to his core, man. He was really hurt that Bobby was using charcoal. But Bobby is saying, hey, look, this is how, he's running a Japanese-German restaurant. And he's like, this is how it was traditionally. They use charcoal. So that's why he uses charcoal. It wasn't like a personal slight on Hank. But Hank took it that way because he was like, I raised you in a house of propane. You went on to use charcoal. But we also know that they did that in the earlier seasons as well, where Bobby fell in love with charcoal and meat cooked on charcoal grills and that kind of stuff. That was a very great episode too, where Hank and Peggy and Bobby was eating like hamburgers off the grill with charcoal or whatever. So that was really good. So they kept that alive. Obviously, they kept alive all of the characteristics of Dale. They pushed him to the limits, though. There's one specific episode that got people all riled up. It was shortly after Hank and Bobby have the conversation about charcoal and propane, where they go to the museum. And they go to this museum, and Hank is teaching history. Well, they're going through this museum. The museum, they discuss the historical, blah, 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 whatever. And Hank knows the true history of all these things. And then here comes Dale with his alternative facts, his alternative history, pushing it past the margins. And so many people got this, like, because Newsmax is featured and Fox News is featured and all that kind of stuff. At least they're mentioned, I should say, not featured, but mentioned. And people get upset about that. They're like, oh, this is the MAGA Republicans versus the Bush Republicans, because Hank. The big question about whether Hank would vote for Trump and all this kind of stuff is like probably not, because Trump is a New York Republican and Hank is a Texas Republican. It's a completely different element. Being a Northeast Republican is basically being liberal in a whole lot of ways, which is why everybody's saying that Trump is like the most conservative. Conservative is ridiculous. It's not. Same thing with Vince McMahon. It's like, yeah, sure, he might be a Republican, but he's a Northeast Republican, which is basically being a Democrat from like the 1970s or something like that. It's not, he's just not a crazy ass socialist, that's all. But there's a lot of conversation about Dale being psychotic, essentially, him having the alternative facts and how people are entertained by Dale. They're interested in the things that Dale says, and he's able to get people's attention, and people believe him. Everybody knew Dale was a kook 25 years ago, right? When the series been off the air for 15 years. So, and that's 2010, thereabouts. But Dale was in peak nuttiness in like 2000, like around that time, because that's when you started seeing Alex Jones and all these people pop up, right? Like that's when he was peak nutty. Now everybody's a little bit nutty, so you have to take Dale to the next level. And so they take him to the next level, and how Alex Jones has become sort of mainstream, his popularity exploded over the years. And now other people have picked up on the Alex Jones, how popular he is. He's been on Joe Rogan. He's been banned from YouTube, but he still pops up on YouTube. People have done what Alex Jones does. There's been documentarians, and there's people in government that now have been listening to Alex Jones their whole life. So the Alex Jones message of one world government, which is, I even go through some of that stuff on this channel. A lot of that stuff is well accepted already. So now you have to take Dale into the further fringe. And that's where things do get a little bit detached from reality. But that actually helps Dale's character. Now, people have said that he was flanderized in that way. But I think if you put Dale in the mode of being in the 2000s, he would sound fairly normal to most people. The humorous thing about Dale is he's absurd, you know? So obviously they have a really funny episode where Dale kidnaps Hank, which was fantastic, by the way. One of my favorite episodes of the entire series. And he kidnaps Hank because he believes that Hank has been turned into a spy, because the real Hank Hill would not be a fan of soccer. And Hank Hill has come back from Saudi Arabia as a fan of soccer. And it's funny as hell. It's really good. It is kind of dark for Dale, because usually Dale would have fucked something like this up. But they actually have him be kind of competent in this respect, where he finds a way to actually trap Hank. So it works, but it is kind of scary. But it's funny. It's really funny. So Dale is there. There was an episode, the beer episode, where Dale works with Joseph. And they kind of work indirectly, where you see that Joseph is just as nutty as Dale. Joseph is an actually interesting character because he looks like John Redcorn, but he talks like Dale. All right. And two of the funniest things that happen in this show is, one, Joseph thinks that he's white, and two, Joseph is actually better at being a conspiracy theorist and a private investigator than Dale is. So that's incredible. I'm not going to spoil the show too much, but Joseph thinking that he's a white man was very funny, and he was not corrected in the matter either, which made it even funnier. But Joseph, despite this fact, he's not just a dupe of Dale. He's still his own character. He still has the same sort of girl crazy approach to that Joseph had as a teenager. He still got it. He's still chasing after cougars. He's hitting on Connie and all this sort of stuff that he's doing. That's all within Joseph's character, because he used to do that stuff as a teenager. So he's still doing it now. The only disappointing thing is Joseph is unfocused. Like, clearly, when you see Connie, she talks a lot about going to college and being in college. Bobby obviously runs a restaurant. Joseph, it's like they didn't think about what Joseph should be doing as an adult, So he works odd jobs. I think he's a construction worker or something like that, which is fine, but he's like 20, 21 years old. Like, he should be doing something else, right? But him and Bobby are roommates, so he's in pretty much every episode that Bobby is in. He's in it too. And Joseph's voice is really good too. So Joseph is a really good character. There's a lot of work they could do, and stretching out, playing out his character and where they could go with him. But I really like Joseph. He's extremely funny in the show too. They put a lot of emphasis on making sure Joseph is funny in this show. All right, so I've been going through this thing for 30 minutes. I've been trying to avoid talking about Bobby and Connie's relationship, but I guess I'm going to have to, because I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I'm going to spend a whole lot of time on it. Connie in the show is just like Connie as a kid. She's super smart. She's going to college. She's a double major in all of this scientific stuff. She's got the tiger parents, where her parents are obviously having high expectations of her. And because that she has to work so hard in school, she doesn't really have much of a social life. So she gets involved with this E&M stuff. And we're going to explain it a little bit. It's ethical non-monogamy. She's in a relationship with Chang Wasana-song, and they're in an open relationship, which means they both can see whoever they want. and they have like this list of people that are on their approved list and all this sort of stuff. And all of this is happening, and her and Bobby don't have any sort of contact. They actually meet each other again after they both have a hookup in separate, in the same dorm with different people. Obviously, Connie is leaving some kind of hookup that she just had with some guy, and Bobby just had a one-night stand with some young lady that he expected more of, and the girl told him, like, no, this is just a one-shot deal, no big deal or whatever. And he looked a little bit hurt by that. And that's the element that introduces the ethical non-monogamy thing, right? So Bobby is looking for love and relationship and that sort of stuff because he doesn't have time for casual dating and going on a bunch of first dates or whatever. Connie doesn't have a lot of time to go on first dates either, but she's doing it the opposite way, where she is willing to have all these casual hookups whenever she can possibly get them. But she is also in this sort of arranged marriage with Chain Wasana-san, right? Where they're neither one of them are limited by the relationship. They're going to be together, but they're going to, traverse and do their own thing. So that's how it's introduced. Now, it's important that you realize that you have some knowledge of the previous series, because obviously Connie's parents have been trying to get her with Chain Wasana-san even back then, right? So now they're adults. Now the parents are really pushing them together. They're putting a lot of pressure on them to be together. And they feel like, they should try to make it work, even though technically they don't have to, right? But it's expected. And there is societal expectations, community expectations on both Connie and Chain in this way. Now, Chain he's not really an investor in Bobby's restaurant. He's sort of the manager of the restaurant, kind of, because Chain's father owns the restaurant and Bobby owns 15% of the restaurant. So he's sort of a part owner, but a minority owner. So Chain basically is watching over Bobby and all that sort of stuff. So that's how this whole thing plays into it. And the cuck angle is people are like, oh, it's a cuckold angle. Well, understand, Bobby and Connie didn't have any relationship until they met outside that dorm. Obviously there was a separation between the two, and the separation lasted for a long time, and they both moved on, essentially. The difference being Bobby didn't really move on. He still was stuck in the teenage years of him and Connie, dating and all that sort of stuff, while Connie, having lost Bobby, the connection with Bobby, she moved on. And the only other guy that was there was Chain Wasana-san, which she knew as a teenager. So there's a comfort level there. But then she's also doing this ethical non-monogamy stuff because obviously Chain is a rich boy. He's got options. He can do whatever he wants. And the only way for him to stay still is if she gives him this option to do whatever he wants, and she takes advantage of it as well. So throughout the Connie-Bobby relationship, as they meet each other, there is some dancing around the issues. For starters, Bobby finds out about the ethical non-monogamy stuff, and they have the first real, headbutt on the subject, where Bobby finds out what it is. He tries to get in on it, like, well, can I be, E&M, ethically non-monogamous too? And Connie tells him, you're not E&M material, right? And Bobby is heartbroken by this. He's like, whoa, I'm not good enough for, he's not understanding what she's trying to say, but he's heartbroken by this whole thing. Now, every time I see people talk about this subject, they never mention the cookies. Now, what the cookies is a serious turning point in the character. After they have the conversation about Bobby not being ethical non-monogamy material, As an apology, Connie sent him some cookies with a note that said he was husband material. All right. But she was just meeting Bobby again. So she mistakenly put the wrong apartment number on the cookies. So they went to the wrong apartment. So Bobby never saw the note. But we saw the note. We, as the viewers, saw the note. So we know how Connie feels about Bobby, right? But Bobby is still stuck in a situation where he's watching Connie and Shane. They're going on. They went on a date in the restaurant, which is a slap in the fucking face. But, you know, Shane Wasana is who he is. But that was the setup. That was the perfect setup right there. That when they met, there was something that was awakened in both of them. And Connie was offended by the whole slut shaming thing about, you know, her sleeping around and all this sort of stuff, which of course was also taken out of context. It's just her being defensive of her lifestyle, which is, we're not sure if she chose it or if it was forced on her. We're not entirely sure about that. And we'll learn more about that, as I'm guessing, as we go forward. But again, not spoiling individual episodes, but she and Shane eventually break up. Okay. Now, the entirety of the series is about Bobby looking for love. You know, he's got the restaurant. He's trying to get the restaurant to work, but he also needs that social life. He wants to reconnect with Connie, but Connie's got this thing with Shane, so he wants to find another girl, this Willow young lady, and she's really great. I wish they didn't cut her out so early. I wish they hadn't get rid of her so early, because she was crazy about Bobby, genuinely liked him. Bobby has one-itis for Connie, and that, so the relationship wasn't going to work because he had to pursue this idea of being with Connie. But Willow is a good character. Hopefully she comes back around. You know, hopefully she doubles back. But Bobby lets her go because he's a nice guy, and he would rather stew over Connie than be with Willow. Willow's a weirdo, by the way. She's very, very weird. And the thing that she got caught doing was so strange that, yes, yeah, I probably wouldn't be able to take her seriously anymore after that either. Again, I'm not going to spoil it. I think it's funnier if you see it for yourself, okay? So if you haven't seen it, you should probably see it. Matter of fact, I should just go ahead and spoil it because I'm trying not to spoil individual episodes too much. But to understand why it didn't work, part of it is because Willow and Hank got very, very close, and they bonded over their love of the Cowboys. You know, and so that becomes an issue because Bobby feels left out of this whole thing. You know, the whole point of them going to this training camp or whatever was so that Bobby and Hank could come together, and it ends up being Hank and Willow coming together. And you know, the idea that even though she's a vegan and she's got like this, you know, thing in her nose and half of her head shaved, and she's everything Hank doesn't like, but she loves football and she knows football and she can catch and she can throw and she can do all this stuff. It makes her a decent girlfriend for Hank, for Bobby, right? But Bobby just kind of wanted to spend time with his dad. You know, he thinks that Willow's a little clingy. She's also very weird. Her whole thing about going to this training camp wasn't to spend time with Bobby. That was part of it. But she also went to get revenge on Jerry Jones. You said you don't condone what Willow did, but you understand. So she went to Jerry Jones' office and she shit on his desk. And it's absolutely absurd. It's one of the most absurd things to ever happen in King of the Hill. Especially for a female character, it's really absurd. Okay? And she got caught doing it, which made it even funnier. She blamed Jerry Jones for her father becoming an alcoholic after he got cut from the Cowboys. And this was her revenge, sort of. And at that point, Bobby says, like, okay, we can't do this. All right. which I fully understand, right? I don't think I'll be able to take a girl seriously if she shit on somebody's desk in revenge. What is she gonna do to you at that point, right? Like she's dangerous. But I do like the character. I wish she would come back. Um, I hope she comes back. That being said, um, the E&M stuff with Connie, it starts to make a whole lot of sense in the later part of the series. When you find out, again, spoilers, that her parents are divorced. At that point, it all starts to click, especially if you are an adult who realizes how relationships work. Con and Min. Now, here is a good storytelling device that they did. Min is in the early season a lot, but she's mostly by herself. She's hanging out with Nancy and Peggy. It's just her. You never see Con. Con's almost not there ever. And then randomly he appears up at the bowling alley with the heels, and this is the only episode that has Con in it, right? It's the only one that he's in it. And then Hank finds out that the Super Nuka phones are divorced, and that Con is living in the garage. But they still do relationship stuff together, with people that don't know that they're divorced, because they really want this arranged marriage between Shane and Connie to work. So their relationship is fake. Okay? So then you look at the parallels between the two. Con and Min are in a fake relationship. Shane and Connie are in a fake relationship. Connie is doing what her parents are doing. That's why the E&M thing is important in the story. She's in a fake relationship with Shane Wasana-san because it's what her parents want, and it's what his parents kind of want. Kind of. So it's an interesting thing, to tell that story. And this is a very important character moment for Connie, because once it's revealed that her parents are divorced, in that very same episode, she breaks up with Shane, because now she doesn't have to pretend to be the perfect girlfriend for Shane Wasana-san anymore. Because now the Wasana-sons don't want their son dating Connie, right? Because she's from a broken family, So that's an important storyline element. So the E&M stuff was Connie's way of doing what her parents wanted her to do, which is to be the perfect girlfriend for this guy that they have been trying to hook her up with since she was like 12 or 13 years old. So it's a perfect storytelling device. It does make Connie look bad initially, but you can tell that she was defensive about it, and you don't really think, as the series goes on, that she was that into it. All right? It wasn't like something she was enthusiastic about. That was just the lifestyle that she was in, and it worked for her, and it worked for Shane, because she was already in college. She wasn't ready to settle down yet. She was in college, and she figures, Shane is the goal. He's going to be her husband, and she's just going to have to wait for him to sow his wild oats, and then she's going to do her thing, and then they're going to end up being together. No. So now Connie is cut free from Shane Wasana-san, and she starts to pursue a relationship with Bobby. At this point, a lot of people are like, okay, Connie and Bobby are Forrest Gump. And it comes across very Forrest Gump. Until you realize, if you watch the show, that Connie eventually leaves Shane. That doesn't mean, however, that it's going to stay this way. But that's the way it is going into the final couple of episodes, where now Connie and Bobby are trying to date, and their dates are not going out well. The dates aren't going well because they try to do very mature things. They go on to the symphony, and they both fall asleep because they're both tired. And so they end up doing kind of childish things. They go into the bouncy house, and they talk almost constantly about things that happened when they were teenagers. And Bobby, in the very last episode, starts to basically ask the question that, is he still in love with Connie? Does Connie still love him? Or is this just the remnants of them being teenagers? How well does he know adult Connie? because when he met her again after all these years, she was doing ethical non-monogamy and all this other stuff, and she drinks a lot too. And that was not mentioned in the show, but you see it a lot. You see Connie drinking a lot in the show. And you see when she gets injured in a later episode, she's also becoming addicted to morphine. And she talks about wanting to do all sort of dirty things with Bobby. And he's like, I don't know. Like, that might be the morphine talking. And it was the morphine talking too, probably. But you see that Bobby is starting to question the relationship. Things is not going as smoothly as they used to. And he's wondering why that is. And he starts to question whether it's just the puppy love that they had as children and not anything based off of them as adults. They don't know each other that well as adults. So that's the end of their story as young adults, because now that's the end of the series. And even the first of this season, they have to start the next season. So the next season is going to be about whether Bobby thinks that this thing with Connie can work out. And obviously uncovering a whole lot of Connie's dark secrets, which who knows what it's going to be. Because again, with this ethical non-monogamy thing, she likely could have had sex with somebody he knows or something like that outside of Chain Wasana Song. We don't know. And whether Bobby feels comfortable with Connie's backstory, all the stuff that she was doing while they were separated. So that could be a whole lot of drama, soap opera drama that they could have between the two of them. And that's going to be interesting, I'd say. But that's what a lot of people are kind of, I don't want to watch the show because I don't want to watch Netarare. Netarare is cuck shit, in the anime fandom where your boyfriend, whatever, or girlfriend, whatever, gets taken by some bully and sexually assaulted to her enjoyment, which essentially is what this whole ethical non-monogamy angle in this series was. Chain Wasana Song is still a bully. He still doesn't like Bobby, and he's banging Connie and pretty much bragging about it. And she's not thrilled about it, but it is what it is. She's working through it. Bobby works through it and they get over it, but is Bobby really over it? Is kind of the question. So that's likely going to be something that's going to be discussed in later seasons, because it seems like she broke up with Chain, they got back together, her and Bobby, but it was too easy, right? It was too easy to just put them back together for now. And because they did it so quickly, I'm thinking there's going to be more drama there. It has to be, so we'll see how far it goes. But I think they did a really good job with that, because it is bothersome, especially if you are a person that watched the entire series and you saw their relationship and how the Super Nuisance phones have always tried to keep them apart and all that sort of stuff. And now they can't. They can't even apply pressure anymore because they have been in this fake relationship, even though the fake relationship has only been for like 2 years or whatever. They've been divorced for 2 years at this point. But they don't have any control over Connie anymore. They've already been ostracized from their community because they're divorced. So that means Connie is ostracized from their community as well. So she can go back to dating Bobby if she wants. That was always the problem. The problem was that Bobby was a poor hillbilly boy. But now she can date whoever she wants because her family's reputation is shredded. But we'll see if they decide to keep up with that. But it's a very interesting show, and it does a really good job with Bobby. Again, Bobby is a character who knows who he is. He remains mostly the same throughout this series. He's still funny. He's still charming. He's still good with girls. Girls like him. He gets laid twice throughout the show, so that's pretty cool. He gets a one night stand with one girl, and then he has Willow, who is his girlfriend, for like 2 episodes or whatever. And then of course he's got this thing with Connie that's starting back up, so he's doing real good. But it's a little early to go to the end game, being Bobby and Connie, which they probably are each other's end game. But I think it's a little soon to go there. So there's going to be some more drama, more than likely, where they're probably going to decide that this thing ain't working. They're going to see other people, yada, yada, yada. Then they'll probably work themselves back together eventually. But I liked the specifically that Connie's parents got divorced, because it's a thing that happens in the real world, and it's something that only really Bill dealt with that in the original series, dealt with the disaster of divorce. And it's something that him and Con could bond over. In fact, at the end of the episode where we find out that Con and Min are divorced, Bill is the one who says, like, "Where's your community now?" and offers Con a beer. And Con closes the garage door on him. Because unlike Bill, who had his heart completely destroyed, and by his wife or whatever, Con still lives on the property, and Min still lives in the property. She just lives in the house. So obviously, there's probably going to be some shenanigans where one of the two of them is going to start dating some other people or something like that. We'll see what ends up happening. But obviously, those plot threads are there now, where to do a lot with the other characters. So it could be some fun stuff on the horizon. Maybe Min will hook up with John Redcorn or something like that to cause more drama in the alley. But overall, it's a really good series. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I went back and watched several episodes twice, 3 times. They were so funny. It's not on the same level as the previous seasons. It's probably better than the last season of King of the Hill. But it's obviously not King of the Hill at its height. But they kept a lot of the same elements. So if you enjoyed King of the Hill, I think you'll like this. It's not woke trash, and it doesn't really denigrate any of the characters. Bobby isn't cucked or humiliated or anything like that. It's just a situation that he wasn't expecting. That, once he applied himself a little bit and, kept himself open, it dissolved on its own. He didn't really have to do anything. He didn't have to kick Shane Wasana-song's ass or anything like that. It was a bad situation that Connie found herself in. She's more comfortable with Bobby. She starts spending all this time with Bobby and Joseph anyway. And the whole thing with Shane goes the way it goes because of how Shane is. She doesn't have to deal with that shit. So it works out perfectly fine in my book. Would I have put that in there? Probably not. But from a writing standpoint, it worked out fine. Nobody's forcing anybody to do anything. There's no shame. There's no guilt. But there still might be shame and guilt. There's enough there where there might be shame and guilt, where there probably might be out on a date and they run into some guy Connie had sex with or whatever. That's probably going to end up being an issue. I can almost guarantee it probably will be. So we'll see in the future, but I like the show. Let's go into the comment section. Okay, I was asked if the Boondocks reboot could work. I definitely think the Boondocks can work. The problem is the Boondocks it cut so deep when it comes to cultural references and some of the things that they were doing on the Boondocks. I don't think an internet, this kind of society probably is not ready for that. I think our modern society can't handle a Boondocks reboot. I don't think we can. Our society couldn't even survive season 4 of the Boondocks. How many episodes of the Boondocks got taken off the air? 2, 3? There's the BET episode, the Winston Jerome episode that was about Tyler Perry. I think there were other episodes too that were taken down. I definitely think you could try to replace John Witherspoon as Grandpa. That would be hard to do because he was so good. But the real issue isn't the voice acting or the characterization; it's the content. You know, the Boondocks. I mean, I could just smell how they would handle like the ADOS and the FBAs and the Blacks for Trump and all this sort of stuff. I could just smell how they would handle that stuff. And I could just tell that those people would cry so hard. They complain so much if they had to deal with that. They would pitch so many bitches. They'd be pitching bitches into the lake. So while I would love it and I would welcome it, I would welcome a Boondocks revival. I don't think the world can handle it because Black culture is so sensitive. Like Black culture was sensitive then, but it wasn't as sensitive as it is now. Like these Negroes today are too sensitive now. I don't think they can handle it, really. You know, again, a lot of the stuff that they made fun of in the Boondocks, they have been making fun of for a long time anyway. You know, the woke brothers, it was making fun of them in Living Color. They used to make fun of that. The woke prison dude, they made fun of that in like Menace to Society and all that sort of stuff. They played on that trope. If they did that today, people would complain about it. They cry about it. You know, so I could just tell they have an entire 5 seasons based off the Bill Cosby stuff, R. Kelly stuff, the Diddy stuff, the Blacks for Trump, you know, people like Candace Owens and Brandon Tatum, all these different people. Man, shit, they have so much material. They have a ton of material. But there's a reason why the Boondocks had to be stopped and they allowed South Park to continue, right? The Boondocks cut too close to the core. You know, they were going after the elites of Negrodom. All right. They didn't just make fun of the hood. They made fun of Black Hollywood. And that's where the people were like, nope. You making fun of Oprah? You making fun of Tyler Perry? You making fun of BET? Nope, we're not gonna let you do that. We're not gonna let you do that. You can make fun of R. Kelly and Negroes, and you can even do a Martin Luther King episode if you want to. We are not about to let you make fun of Tyler Perry, BET, and Oprah. No. No. So I don't think they're gonna let them happen. I don't think they'll let it happen. Even though the Boondocks probably would be fantastic as a revived show. I don't see why it wouldn't be good. The Generation Sharingan said also there's a lot of people who are really nitpicking and criticizing the Boondocks, and guess what kind of political leaning they go by. Yeah, they will only want to make fun of one side. But the thing about the Boondocks is the idea of not being able to define a woman is clearly Boondocks material. All right. You know, having a Black Supreme Court justice that says she doesn't know how to define a woman, that's Boondocks material right there. Could you imagine that conversation that you're gonna end up having? Like, are you serious? That conversation is nuts. You had a Black female Supreme Court justice who says she can't define what a woman is. Bro, the Boondocks would have ate her alive. You feel me? She'd have got eaten alive. That'd have been crazy. That'd have been crazy. The Jasmine Crockett's, oh, that'd have been nuts. The Ilhan Omar's, oh, they'd have destroyed these people. And they the one that wanted that. They didn't wanted you to make fun of Candace Owens, which they would have, because Candace Owens is a big enough figure for them to mock and complain about and make fun of. They would definitely have made fun of her. You could probably get like a half season worth of material out of just Candace Owens. But then also, you know, Bill Cosby and people like that. It would have been fun. But no. We already saw that the high levels of the Black elite do not like the Boondocks. They did not like it. They applied pressure and got episodes pulled. That was part of the reason why the show got canceled. It wasn't because all of a sudden the show wasn't popular anymore. The Boondocks are still popular today. Like, I don't know if it's still running in newspapers today. I'm not sure if they still run in newspapers, but the show is still popular today. It's insane, right? But when you realize that they were having episodes pulled that were DVD only episodes that you had to buy the DVD to see them, yeah, buddy, forget it. They tried to do a kind of a knockoff of the Boondocks with that Black Dynamite cartoon, and even that got killed. That got killed too. That wasn't very good though, but they even got rid of that one. Yeah, Granddad and Riley about what a woman is, and maybe Huey trying to explain it, or trying to come up with some kind of revolutionary excuse for it, or all that kind of shit. It could be some really funny hijinks around it. The female rappers, like they used to have Thugnificent and all that, but now you got Lotto and the baddie rappers like Cardi B and all of them. They could have so much fun with those characters, but those bitches would probably complain and cry, and they'd say it was misogyny and all this sort of stuff, right? But nobody had a problem. It was Thugnificent, like nobody cared. But if they have a reboot, they have to make fun of Cardi B and Lotto and Megan Thee Stallion and Nicki Minaj and all of them. They wouldn't want that either. The stand accounts would cry and complain and bitch and moan. They have to talk about how Beyonce keep turning herself whiter and whiter and having blonde hair and jumping from being Egyptian to being a cowboy and having all these other gimmicks. People would complain about that. Jay-Z's dreadlocks. There's just so much stuff for you to talk about on a cultural level. The Drake stuff, there's just so much there on a Black culture level that the Boondocks could mine for material, but damn well they're not going to allow them to do that. You said the creator of the Boondocks was very hesitant to even have Black female characters. There were still some Black female characters on the show. He just didn't feature any. Imagine Uncle Ruckus. Yes, Uncle Ruckus at January 6th. Uncle Ruckus as a Trump supporter. Like, this stuff could be tremendous. Uncle Ruckus listening to Candace Owens and Brandon Tatum, maybe even being related to them or that kind of stuff. That shit could be hilarious. It could be really good. But they would never allow that shit today. They never allow it. They're making fun of Tariq Nasheed and Yvette Carnell. I mean, come on. Oh, come on. No. They be saying like, oh, Aaron Magruder is a Fed. He be everything under the book. Yeah, Sexy Red. Oh my God. Could you imagine these trifling broads? They be destroying these broads, man. It would be so fucking funny, but they'll never do it. You would think the success of King of the Hill's revival, it's been so successful that they have already announced that there's going to be another season. So Cartoon Network, whoever owns Cartoon Network, they're missing out on money by not reviving the Boondocks. They were supposed to revive the Boondocks while Pops was still alive. That was what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago? And then he ended up passing away, and they just used that as an excuse to drop it. Man. They can make fun of LeBron James and his barbershop podcast. Like, there's so much stuff for you to talk about. All these goofy basketball players on podcasts and stuff like this, man, could be so much fun. But they'll never do it. And they won't allow anybody else to do it. Like, you won't have like Dave Chappelle come out and make fun of this stuff anymore. That there's nobody who makes fun of these people. Did you ever notice that? There's nobody who makes fun of the baddie rappers. Nobody makes fun of them. Nobody talks about how they all sound the same, how they all terrible. Nobody does that. They talk about white people all day. That's it. That's it. It's so boring. You have black people doing incredibly stupid things on television all the time now. Nobody makes fun of it anymore. All of our cultural element have made fun of white people, also made fun of ourselves, the lower part of ourselves as well. But we don't have comedians that are willing to go there anymore. Dave Chappelle veers off into the LGBT stuff, but he doesn't talk about like the baddie rappers and that kind of shit. Like those people are culturally dominant. Nicki Minaj and Cardi B and Lotto and what's that other one? Glorilla. Like those people are everywhere now. They're in commercials, their videos are thrown in your face by Twitter and YouTube constantly. And nobody is mocking these people ever. Nobody. No comedian has gotten popular mocking these people, female or male. Why are they so protected? You can go back and look at comedians from Comic View, Def Comedy Jam. They would make fun of whatever the top rappers were. They would make fun of them. Not today. Doesn't happen today. Very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Yeah, they probably have like a couple of black controversial YouTubers on there. The idea of podcasting is pretty humorous because it's all just Negroes saying the same thing in a circle. I think Ice Spice is actually the lowest hanging fruit of the baddie rappers because she's so bad that she's 90% ass, 99% ass actually. Like she doesn't even have skill. Like you can't even hear what she's saying. Her voice is so soft. You can't even hear what she's saying. It's all booty all the time. She's the easiest one to make fun of out of all these broads, which is why she probably is the only one that if people are going to make a joke, is usually an Ice Spice joke. But the rest of them, they get off the hook, and they're terrible. They're absolutely terrible. I'm just starting to pay attention to how bad that Lotto is. She's awful, bro. Like there was some new video she put out, and I guess they bought a YouTube ad to promote it, and it's like 30 seconds. I played 30 seconds of it, and she takes T.I.'s 24s, the hook to that song, and she puts it in the baddie rap style, and it's the worst fucking thing I have ever heard in my life. Like, for starters, I feel old because T.I.'s 24s is like 20 years old. Okay, the song came out in like 2005 or 2006 or something like that. It's almost 20 years old. So to her, who was probably like 24 or 25 or something like that, it's something she listened to as a child. It would be like when Snoop Dogg, redid some OJ's record or something like that. So that's kind of how it is for her. But it's terrible. It's awful. It's really, really, really bad shit. And people just kind of, and that's why I don't really like black podcasts. They don't call this stuff out. How Joe Budden talk about this shit all day and don't talk about how bad Lotto is. Don't talk about how bad Ice Spice is. He don't want to be considered a hater, so he don't mention it. If it was a white boy making rap music this bad, every black person would be talking about it. If white people or Hispanics or Asians or whatever was making music as bad as Megan Thee Stallion, Cardi B, Nicki Minaj, Lotto, Glorilla, whatever, they'd be talking about it constantly. But because they're black women, and in Lotto's case, half black woman, people are like, oh, well, no, these people are the shits. They're the shits. And most of them are completely and totally fake. Their bodies are constructed with surgery and BBLs and boob jobs and all this other shit. And it's disgusting, bro. The whole baddie rap scene is disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. But nobody's willing to talk about it. The Boondocks absolutely would talk about it. But that's why they're not going to be allowed to have another season. Because then they'd be like, oh, you're bullying the girls. Well, the guys haven't changed that much. Outside of some of them being fags now, they haven't really changed that much. The girls are the ones that are now, it used to just be Trina and Lil Kim doing this sort of stuff. But now there's every other female rapper is talking about the same stuff. You know, we'll never have another Chappelle Show, Boondocks, In Living Single, In Living Color, In Living Single, In Living Color. We'll never have none of that stuff anymore. They don't believe in it. Those people want to have so much control over the culture. You'll never have those people. You'll never have that sort of cultural critique ever again. It's a shame. The entire altar of wokeness needs to be torn down from stem to stern in order for us to get true black comedy to return. The black comedy so many of us grew up on that made fun of black people and white people, but was honest about it and told the truth. Forget it. There's no more of that stuff anymore. Now we got propagandists who will more than likely have, oh, we want Megan Thee Stallion and Lotto to feature on the show, so we're not going to make fun of them. What? No. Hell no. No. That's why when I heard they're making another Friday movie, you know, the final Friday film, I'm like, what the fuck is this going to be about? Because it's going to be carved up. And there's already people saying, oh, well, Ice Cube is a Trump supporter. So it's like, there's nothing you can do. You can't win. Dave Chappelle is not woke enough. And if Ice Cube tries to do another Friday movie and incorporate some of this stuff, they're going to say, well, he's a Trump supporter. So there's that. All right, let's talk about Fantastic Four real quick. Because I genuinely think that Fantastic Four was a good movie. It wasn't great, but it was good. For a Marvel movie, a late stage Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, I think it was pretty good. The Fantastic Four is pretty simple. Obviously, it's a family of the Richards family. I'm not going to go through the entire movie. Just going to give you the basic rundown. The movie is set in the 60s. It's kind of retro futuristic, which I think is fantastic. If you bought the Mighty Marvel Masterworks version of the Fantastic Four, which is Lee and Kirby, you will get that this is brought to life in this movie. But you don't get the origin story. Instead, they skip the origin story. They give you the origin story like in a montage or something. We start the movie with finding out that Reed and Sue are pregnant. Well, Sue is pregnant. Reed is the father, of course. And you realize that the Fantastic Four are celebrities, so this is a celebrity baby, all this sort of stuff. They've been active for several years already. The movie is set in the 60s. You see them fighting like the Red Ghost and his apes and Mole Man and him doing all these different things. And they set up the Future Foundation. It exists already in this universe. They got Herbie, you know, the helper robots in this movie. And then the female Silver Surfer shows up and tells them that the Earth is doomed, that Galactus is coming to consume the planet. And that is what kicks the plot into place. Now, the movie is about 2.5 minutes, I think. 2.5 minutes. 2 hours and 30 minutes. Almost 2.5 hours. So it's kind of long. But they wanted to pack a whole lot in the story. The long and the short of it is, how do they stop Galactus from eating the planet? They don't know what Galactus is at this point, so they have to go on, do some exposition about who Galactus is, what Galactus is, et cetera, et cetera. They have no idea what a Silver Surfer is. There's no male Silver Surfer here, so it's Shala Ball, who is technically a female Silver Surfer. She's not in the Lee and Kirby series, so I was wrong about saying that if you read the Lee and Kirby stuff, you'll get this entire story. It's not true. We also don't get Franklin in that story either. I'm not a big fan of Franklin Richards, but we'll talk about that some other time. So the Fantastic Four, they go into space and they try to negotiate with Galactus. You know, hey, how can I get you to not eat our world? And Galactus says, well, I want the baby. Give me the baby. The baby's got the power cosmic. Give me the baby. Sue is like, I'm not giving you the baby. So Galactus is like, okay, well, I guess I'll eat the Earth then. Who cares? Now, this, of course, is a change because in the comics, Franklin Richards is a mutant with multiversal powers. But in the cinematic universe, he has the power cosmic. The power cosmic is what Galactus has. It's also what the Silver Surfer has. The Galactus has the power cosmic already. And he bestows it upon the Silver Surfer, which gives the Silver Surfer all the powers that he has. But now they're saying we have to find some way to explain Franklin Richards being able to do all this stuff. He has the power cosmic as a baby. All right, fine. Who cares? But of course, all of this is because Sue was mutated as an adult, which gave her all these powers. They spend time running from Galactus. They actually tell the Earth, which I think was pretty cool, hey, Galactus wanted our baby. We're not giving our baby to Galactus. And the humans were like, what? But Sue gives this really great speech about not wanting to sacrifice her world for the baby and not wanting to sacrifice her baby to the world. I thought that was pretty good. They start putting together how they could stop Galactus, and they come up with this plan. Reed comes up with this plan where they use Franklin as bait to lure Galactus into this interdimensional trap where they send him to the other side of the universe outside of his ship. So that's the plan. They hide the human beings underneath the city of New York using Mole Man. And they try to trap Galactus only for it to fail because Galactus is, has X-ray vision and he can find where Franklin is and all that sort of stuff. Ultimately, they catch up with Galactus and they open the portal, and they fight with Galactus. Galactus looks great here. In the second movie, what was this? What was it? 2006 maybe? Silver Surfer movie. Galactus was just a cloud, like he was just kind of a silhouette. That was garbage, especially since they killed it. Like you can't really kill Galactus. Well, technically in the comics you can, even though it's not supposed to be possible. But that's why I don't like Franklin Richards. So then you have this tug of war where Galactus is after the baby, and Sue Storm, who's her main power is invisibility, but she also can create force fields. And she technically is the strongest member of the Fantastic Four. This comes later. This is not a Lee and Kirby idea that she's the strongest member of the Fantastic Four. That comes later. Because they get a lot of complaints, and you could tell they actually did an issue in the Mighty Marvel Masterworks version of the Fantastic Four, where people complain that Sue is useless, essentially. That all she can do is be invisible. She can't really do anything. So throughout the years, the 60, 70 years that the Fantastic Four has existed, people have found different ways of making Sue useful. She's been a SHIELD agent, which I'm not surprised they didn't go that. I'm surprised they didn't go that route here, where they used her for stealth. But they've also given her these force field powers, where she can, she's like this defensive master or whatever, and she has the upper capabilities to push Galactus with force fields. Now, I saw a lot of people complain about this, like, how does she have this kind of power? It's technically possible for her to do this, and they're pulling also on the heartstrings of this is a mother protecting her baby, and she's got this abnormal upper level of strength as she's a mom protecting her baby, and she's not really defeating Galactus as much as she's just pushing Galactus back into the black hole that Reed has created in the middle of New York City, and she pushes Galactus, and he doesn't fully go through, which I thought was great. But her last gasp got them close enough. They learn through history. Well, Johnny Storm, he's a ladies' man in the series. He wasn't given a whole lot to do in the movie. So his fixation was on the Silver Surfer. Her being female, he becomes fixated on her. He begins to pick up signals of her natural language, and he pieces together her origin story, which is the origin story of the Silver Surfer. Galactus brought her in to be his herald in return for protecting her world. So they show you through the flashback that she was a mother. She had children of her own, but she's been with Galactus so long now that she kind of forgot about that. And, Johnny brings this up and sort of guilt trips her because the Silver Surfer is so powerful. The power cosmic is so powerful. The Fantastic Four cannot defeat the Silver Surfer. Nobody can, really. And she's shamed and guilt tripped into leaving Earth. And she's also shamed and guilt tripped into helping Sue defeat Galactus. So as Sue gives the last final push, the Silver Surfer comes in with one big, rush with the board and everything, and knocks Galactus into the portal, and Galactus is sent to the other side of the universe. She saved the day. So it's a pretty solid, wholesome movie. Sue, usually when she uses her powers at her upper level, she gets nosebleeds and severe headaches. But in this situation, it was so severe that she actually died, and her baby resuscitated her. Franklin Richards brought her back to life because he can do that, and he's a baby. He can do that. There's a lot of nuts and bolts into the movie that I skipped over because I don't want to be here all day talking about this thing. But I think as a family movie, it was good. Yes, I know the movie did not do well in the box office. It fell off a cliff in the second week. I think a lot of that is because people are tired of Marvel movies. People are sick to death of these movies and of this universe and of these characters. And it takes them so long to get something done that people are becoming frustrated. I don't think this has anything to do with Pedro Pascal being a weirdo. It might have to do a little bit with people being tired of him, but I think it mostly has to do with Marvel has scraped the very bottom of their characters. Wonder Man, Ironheart, the Thunderbolts. They've done everything they possibly can to stretch out the cinematic universe, and people are tired of it. They're kind of sick of it. If they would have reintroduced the Fantastic Four after the fall of Thanos, I think this movie, if it had had this movie after what was that, Endgame, I think it was, where they beat Thanos, people would have been like, oh shit, the next several movies and everything is going to be really good. Yeah, people would have been pissed that Galactus was taken out, but people would have been like, okay, this would have been really good. What's next? Doctor Doom, right? You got Doctor Doom. You got Kang the Conqueror. He's also a Fantastic Four villain. So you got some stuff there. You got Annihilus, who was also sort of a Fantastic Four villain. You got some stuff there, But they didn't go that route. They went with the really bad Thor movie, the really shitty Black Widow movie, and they did all the shitty TV shows. They put out the shitty Shang-Chi movie, and the shitty Captain America movie, and people are kind of like, okay, enough. Enough's enough. We've been doing this for 10 years before we got to Endgame. It's been a long time now. You know, yes, the Fantastic Four are important characters, but you've run this universe into the ground. You know, the Fantastic Four were never, well, they were Marvel's very first and most successful book until Spider-Man really took off. But in recent years, the Fantastic Four have not been that popular. Part of it is because Marvel didn't have the movie rights, so they were kind of kicking the shit out of the comics, and they were just allowing bums to write the comics and not really put any effort into the comic books, and they sort of denigrated the brand. And they did that same thing with the X-Men too, where they didn't have the movie rights, so they denigrated the franchise and basically destroyed it, tried to destroy it anyway, in order to tank the popularity of it. And they did a good job of it, because now the movie isn't doing that great. Again, the Marvel Cinematic Universe used to be so strong that characters like Doctor Strange, who almost nobody ever read a comic book of, was popular in the theaters. You know? The Scarlet Witch, who could not carry a comic book to save her fucking life, was a popular character in the theaters. And then they did that WandaVision thing and pretty much tanked the character. Then they turned her heel and tanked her even more. Which they should have saved that heel turn for when they introduced the X-Men so that they could do, no more mutants. I don't know why they just didn't wait. But everything about this has been a disaster, bro. So I don't know, man. But I understand why the movie flopped. I get it. It was a good movie, but when you put it into context of the rest of everything else, it wasn't going to work out. WG Phil says, how are they going to explain the Richards family going from Hispanic to black when Kang is a descendant of Reed? Well, because Kang is from so far in the future that, obviously he could have black people in his family. So he's from the far-flung future of Reed Richards. So I don't know that much about Kang the Conqueror in the comics, but I know that he is a descendant of Reed Richards, but he's not like a direct descendant. He's like maybe well into the future. So you could come up with any kind of excuse. Plus, also, Kang the Conqueror looks different ways because he's been traveling through time. So he has all these different bodies and all these different personalities or whatever, and one of them could just possibly be black. So you could do that. They need to bring back the Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider was a very fun character in the 90s. All attempts to make Ghost Rider fun in modern day have failed. Mainly because they made Ghost Rider Hispanic. I don't have a problem with the Hispanic Ghost Rider. I don't even have a problem with him driving a car. But the cool element of the Ghost Rider, will they lean into it? No, because they can't even get Blade to work. Like, Blade is as simple as pie. It's a vampire. It's a guy killing vampires. They can't get it to work. I don't know. I don't think Ghost Rider would work. I wish they would bring back like the Midnight Suns. That would be great. You already got Doctor Strange. So bring in the Ghost Rider, bring in Blade, and put together the Midnight Suns. They're not going to do that either. You're not going to do that either, man. That sucks, though, because the Ghost Rider is really fucking cool. PG Phil says Wonder Man should have been on Avengers character or a villain for Iron Man 2 or 3. He should have introduced him as an Avengers character because that's what he is. Wonder Man can't carry a series by himself. I don't know anything about Wonder Man outside of he was in the Avengers. That's it. I know there was a Wonder Man comic book for a while, but I don't know anything about Wonder Man. But the fact that they didn't do a Nova series, they didn't do a Quasar series, you have the Guardians of the Galaxy. You've already introduced the Nova Corps. Why didn't you just do a Nova movie? You could talk about deep space and do whatever the fuck you want. You could have done a Quasar movie. It's kind of like Quasar is kind of obscure because he's kind of like a Green Lantern. But you could have done a movie about him, not even a movie, a TV show, or you could just put him into the Nova movie if you wanted. But I think the Nova Corps could have carried the movie. Richard Rider is a fun character, and you already introduced the Nova Corps in the Guardians of the Galaxy, so it could have been a spinoff movie. Would have made a lot of sense. And then you could have did the Kid Nova as well, which also would have been fun. Because I know a lot of people hated the Kid Nova. I didn't hate it. I thought it was cute actually. They did Werewolf by Night special presentation with a Hispanic Jack Russell. Lord have mercy. They did a Moon Knight TV show, which was fine, but nobody talks about it. Nobody remembers it. I didn't even watch it. That's how little impact these Marvel movies have started. I love Moon Knight. I didn't even want to watch it. I wasn't even interested in watching it. That's how bad this stuff has been. And that's why I think Daredevil kind of sucks so bad, man. Well, Daredevil was fine, but the expectations of Daredevil kind of fell short because they're doing so much. You don't have to pump out a TV show or a movie for every single fucking character. Moon Knight could have been a character in Daredevil, Wonder Man could have put him in the Avengers. Ironheart could have been an Iron Man character. There's other ways you could have used to freshen up these storylines. Or if you wanted to use Ironheart as a Black Panther character, you could have done that. I wouldn't have suggested that. I would have suggested that she's a Tony Stark character. But whatever. But they decided they want to try to make all of these characters their own franchise, and it didn't work. They did a Miss Marvel TV show, for God's sake. Well, why? Does Sana Amanat really still have that kind of power? Darren Miles thinks Ant-Man and the Wasp movie and terrible Miss Marvel movie killed the MCU momentum. No, because what's the name was still good. Endgame. Those movies were before Endgame. They were mistakes. Okay? But Endgame still ended up being pretty good. And I didn't hate Ant-Man and the Wasp. I thought it was mid, but I didn't hate it. I loved the first Ant-Man movie. And the crazy thing is they made Ant-Man work. They made Ant-Man charming. They made it work. The problem is Miss Marvel was a huge start of a problem. Because she was supposed to be like a female Superman. But they made it so feminist and so toxic that people didn't want to see it, and then they didn't want to see anything with her in it. So then they toned down her in Endgame because people didn't like her. So they obviously were building up Captain Marvel to be the person who could fight Thanos. That was the reason that they introduced her. But people hated her so much that I still haven't seen that movie, by the way. I still haven't seen it. But they toned her down, way down, just to get through it. And I thought they would have had a second movie by now, but they didn't. So whatever. But after Endgame, they went full woke, and they ruined everything. They had to have a Black Widow movie, which wasn't necessary. I mean, she was dead already. You didn't need to do an origin movie. We knew everything we needed to know about Natasha, if we're being honest. And yes, Natasha is a character who has had solo series, but you could have done a Black Widow TV show and probably would have been just as effective, especially if you're going to introduce Yelena. That would have been fine. But she is also an Avengers character, and you probably could have just done that in an Avengers movie. And you also kind of, back in the day, Black Widow was important to Daredevil. You could have done something like that, or you could have put her in the Hawkeye TV show because she's also an important Hawkeye character. Even though I don't think Hawkeye can probably cover a series by himself. And they did the whole thing with Hawkeye just to introduce Kate Bishop, who everybody hates Kate Bishop. It's not. It's so problematic because you don't have to hate Kate Bishop, but people do because of the way that they did the thing. Kate Bishop became Hawkeye because Clint Barton quit being Hawkeye. And he quit because Mockingbird was killed. You know, his wife died and he went into like a depression, turned into Ronin, and was going around being a ninja. And that was a good reason for him not to want to be Hawkeye anymore. He didn't want to be the man that Mockingbird knew, you know. But they didn't even bring Mockingbird into the MCU, which was weird. I thought they'd have did that by just by having Hawkeye in it, but they chose not to. So okay. But that's why Kate Bishop became Hawkeye. And obviously they did the thing where Clint became Hawkeye again because he found out that Mockingbird was still alive and it was just a scroll that died or whatever. I don't know. I forget how that happened. But you don't have to hate Kate Bishop, but they ended up making it a Kate Bishop thing where they're partners or whatever. And I like the comic book. I think the comic book was pretty good. I know a lot of people hate it. I didn't. I liked it personally. I like the Hawkeye comic book series. That was the two of them working together, and then it eventually became a Kate Bishop book, and it got canceled shortly after that. But it started running as a Kate Bishop only book, you know, with female writers like Kelly Thompson and stuff, and Clint would show up every once in a while. That was problematic, I think. But they didn't need to make a Hawkeye series. Like, we knew everything we need to know about her. Mockingbird was an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah, she was a S.H.I.E.L.D. character. Was she on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show? I don't remember watching it. I don't watch the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show. Apparently, Captain Marvel was meant to be introduced in Age of Ultron. That'd have been anticlimactic. She'd have been much stronger than Ultron, even though she's not really supposed to be. Darren Miles says, "Don't waste your time, Mongo. Ms. Marvel was one of the worst superhero movies of all time. All the best parts was the Ken credits and Samuel L. Jackson. I have no interest in watching it, though. I have no interest in watching it. Is Gambit one of my 8 favorite X-Men? Yes, I like Gambit. The thing is, Gambit's solo comics are not good, though. They're not good. Gambit has never been an interesting character in the comics. He's always interested in the cartoons. His popularity is 100% because of the animated series. I don't think anybody who has read like X-Men comics walked away thinking that Gambit was their favorite character, because he gets almost no love in the comic books. There's a lot of characters, man, that look, I get it. When they started doing the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they didn't have the X-Men, they didn't have Fantastic Four, they didn't have Spider-Man. So they did the best what they could with what they had. But it was clear that after Endgame, they decided to just flood the market with really bad storytelling and really bad TV shows. Poorly thought together plans, and it killed the franchise. It killed what they were doing. And the Fantastic Four not succeeding is largely because they killed it. They killed it, you know, because nothing was wrong with this movie. Even if you saw the female Silver Surfer and was like, ugh, cringe, they gave you a good reason why she was female. She wasn't just female because, well, Johnny Storm needs to have a crush on somebody. She was female so they could parallel her with Sue Storm. You know, she could see herself in Sue's story of motherhood. She sacrificed herself to save her family. And this is what the Fantastic Four was doing. They were sacrificing themselves to save their family. And she recognized, you know, that they had that in common and helped. You know, so her being female in the movie actually made sense and was actually quite helpful. Even though, yes, a male character could have done the same thing, because a male character was doing the same thing. Oh, she was on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show? Okay. All right. So the David Mamet question is, what does your hero want? Well, um, what they want is to prevent Galactus from eating the Earth. What is standing in their way? Well, the Silver Surfer is standing in their way. The people of Earth, to a degree, is standing in their way. There's a lot of public pressure on them to just cough up the kid. There's also the Silver Surfer, who was kind of like, whatever plans you guys have are going to thwart the plans. Like the Silver Surfer went around blowing up the various transport terminals or whatever that they had planned for Galactus. No, they were going to move the planet. I'm sorry. They were going to transport the planet because transporting Galactus was too hard. They was going to transport the planet to a different solar system, which sounds like it would have just instantly killed everybody. That's what it sounded like. But they never got there. But the Silver Surfer went and broke everything anyway. So she was a big problem. What happens if they don't get it? Well, obviously everybody dies. The Galactus eats the Earth, and everybody dies. And Galactus takes Franklin and raises their son. And why now? Well, the story is happening because the Silver Surfer showed up and warned them that Galactus is coming. So that's why it's happening. They just so happened to be pregnant at the time, and that bought them some extra time, I think. But it's a good story. It's a good movie. It's a good Fantastic Four movie. I know some people are kind of shitty about, why is Galactus being used in the first movie. Look, man, they've done Doctor Doom to death. This is the second time they've done the Silver Surfer. I mean, these are very important characters into the Fantastic Four universe, though. So the only thing they could have done other than Galactus or Doctor Doom, would have been, I don't know, Mole Man or Namor. But they used Namor for the Black Panther movie, and Namor is not a Black Panther character; he's a Fantastic Four character. They built the Namor Black Panther thing off of what was that? The Phoenix Five, when Namor destroyed Wakanda while he was gassed up on the Phoenix powers. Isn't that how it happened? And then the two of them got into this big issue about that. It was a whole ordeal. But he wasn't even supposed to be in the Black Panther universe. He's supposed to be a Fantastic Four character. But what do I know? I'm not in control of their cinematic universe, bro. So it is what it is. But it was a fine movie, man. It was all very wholesome. King of the Hill was wholesome. Fantastic Four was very wholesome. In terms of the politics of the movie, it was pro-baby, actually, pro-life. They didn't want to sacrifice their baby. The people were multiracial and they got along. It was almost very idyllic on Earth, which was a little jarring to a degree, as you had constantly black people and white people living together, and there was no racial strife, there was no complaining or anything like that. They got the fantastic car, and they're flying around, and they're celebrities, which is all fits into the Fantastic Four. They're supposed to be celebrities. The Fantastic Four and Captain America are like the two superheroes that, well, the Fantastic Four is a group, but they're like the ones that everybody already knows who they are, And then Tony Stark comes later, and everybody knows he's Iron Man. But most of the people are anonymous to the public. But then you have like the government supports Reed Richards and all that kind of stuff, and that's a whole different kettle of fish. But I liked the movie. I thought it was good. Did a lot. Did a lot here. Talked a lot about King of the Hill. Talked a lot about Fantastic Four. Hopefully you will go see these things. I do think Fantastic Four is good enough that if you want to wait for it to come on a streaming service, watch it there. But I definitely think you should support that movie. I'm not one of those people that say don't watch anything if you hated Captain Marvel and you hated Black Widow, then don't watch anything. No, watch what you like, and incentivize them to make more of what you like. Because if you don't watch anything, they stop making everything. And then what? If it's going to lose money, they might as well just make what they want, right? If it's going to lose money, they should just make what they want. But if it's going to make money, then they may make what you want. What do I think of the suits? I think it looked very much. I liked how the suits looked. It looked very comic booky. Also, I didn't mention like the characterization of like the Thing or Johnny Storm. Now, the characterization of the characters in the Fantastic Four I thought were pretty good. They leaned very heavily into the neurosis and the anxiety and sort of the autism of Reed Richards, where he kind of recognizes that, you know, he's not all the way there, that he's a workaholic. He suffers from, you know, from not being able to separate himself from his work, and he's a tinkerer, and, you know, he's questioning that about himself. But he also uses it very well in the movie as he starts baby-proofing the tower immediately. As soon as he finds out she's pregnant, he starts baby-proofing everything. He started baby-proofing the city, actually, to make it interesting. He wants to scan the baby constantly, again and again, to make sure the baby is not mutated or any other, you know, has radiation or anything like that. Only to find out that the baby can control his own powers, like he's sentient even as a baby. So he can mask who and what he is. I think Sue Storm has a lot more personality here than she usually has. But this was largely, I would say it was a her movie. So it was fine. Johnny Storm was toned down quite a bit. He wasn't the jokester he usually is. He wasn't given a whole hell of a lot to do. In the other movies, they kept trying to make him the coolest guy in the world, where he drives a fast car and he wants to be a movie star and all that kind of stuff. They kind of toned that down, you know. So then you had Ben Grimm, who was also usually the depressed character, very concerned, very vain, very concerned about his look, kind of frustrated in being a rock monster. At this point, he's been a rock monster for a while, and he would still rather not be a rock monster, but he's not like grumpy about it, actively grumpy. But they did do his usual, where he tries to talk to a girl and was very concerned about how the woman would like him being a giant rock monster. But that's not overplayed either. This is very much a movie about Sue and Reed and the baby. So it was good in that way. Sano said Fantastic Four had a good story and look, but I can't believe what they did to Galactus. They said he never went full power, or else he would have destroyed the whole planet, including Franklin. Right. And technically, the idea of Galactus being able to stand on a planet is pretty ridiculous. Like he's so large physically, he cannot stand on a planet. like okay, so I already knew they were doing something if Galactus was going to be walking on the face of the earth. I already knew they were going to be doing something weird. So and that's the problem with Galactus anyway, is that he's one of these characters that is super overpowered in the comics, and is so incredibly overpowered that anything except him completely obliterating planet Earth is, you didn't do him justice. But that's the problem with comics. You know, in comics, you can do whatever you want. So the threat level can be maximum all the time. In the movie, you have to make it somewhat some stuff that people can survive, you know? Like, nobody wants to see, like, the Earth get decimated. I know that there were a lot of people saying that they thought Galactus was going to eat this planet and that the Fantastic Four would escape to a different universe. I thought that too. In watching the movie, I thought that the natural thing would be that Reed would make the tough decision to leave the planet and basically leave the planet to be eaten. I'm glad he didn't do that, because it would have been shitty, and it would have been Reed Richards' Illuminati thought process, which not my favorite when it comes to Reed Richards, man. The Illuminati made some really bad decisions. They made some really bad decisions. But for the smartest people in the universe, they made some really stupid decisions. And that would have been it. I'd have been like, man, these guys just has to. But it would have put over how hard Galactus is to defeat. I'm glad they didn't pull the ultimate nullifier. I'm really glad for that. That sucks. I hate that. They say he can change size, and that human size is his true form. I've never seen a human size Galactus. Every Galactus I've seen, he's been super big. Now I haven't read every issue of the Fantastic Four, so there's probably people who have read more than me. And every time I've seen Galactus, he's been able to survive in space without his suit. He's been able to survive in space without his ship. So the idea of sending him to the other end of the universe, I was like, well, I guess he could float for a while, but he'd still be alive, like he'll be fine. But I don't know, like if he's like a natural humanoid size. I thought he was always a giant or something like that. But again, maybe people know a little bit more about this than I do. Did I see that Ripa getting a toy for Isom by Todd McFarlane? No, I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. I'm glad that he's just doing his thing, man, and not getting too caught up in whatever this bullshit other people be talking about. I'm glad he's doing his thing, man. That's really it should be for some people inspiring, but apparently it's not. I don't know what he's doing to these people, but there's new people mad at him every day. There's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles guy that's now mad at him. I'm like, what is this guy mad at? Eric July. Like this guy's just mad at him for no reason now. Like, okay. I don't ever want to get that popular where people just hate you for no reason. I don't need that in my life. I promise. All right. Thanks everybody for stopping by. It's almost 12 o'clock, isn't it? Oh, it's 11 o'clock. I appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys later. Peace out.